2:17 on your Monday afternoon. How do you feel about it when the dictionaries come out with the word of the year? It's sort of hard to wrap your brain around the fact that of all the words we say, of all the words that are printed, of all the words that are in social media, one word and one word stands alone as the word of the year. Today, Merriam-Webster came out with the word of 2024, and that word is polarization. Polarization. Polarization is the word of the year. What do we think about that? Do we like it? Do we lean into it? Are you going to use it more now, knowing it's so absolutely popular? Joining us for the conversation, will it be polarizing? Joining us for the conversation, welcome back to the show, Stefan Dollinger, who is a professor of English linguistics at the University of British Columbia at Vancouver, also an expert in Canadianisms, and for the first time, editor of the Canadian English Dictionary, John Chu. Welcome both of you to Connect.
Hi, Sarah. Great to be back.
All right, I'm going to ask you first, Stefan Dollinger, Professor Dollinger, as the lover of Canadian words and the expert on Canadianisms. When you hear a word like polarization as the word of the year, what's your instant vibe and response to it?
Well, my instant response to it would be that it's, of course, an American choice from an American dictionary publisher. That it's fitting for the political debate that's been going on, that's been ravaging this country for a long time. Do we have it here in Canada? A little bit. Is it a great choice for Canada? No, definitely not. There are better ones. So that's my gut reaction here.
And John Chu, editor of the Canadian English Dictionary, as someone who knows how this works and behind the scenes, can you take us through how a word of the year is actually picked and chosen?
Sure. So each authority has its own system. Some will prefer newly coined words. Others like ones that are in the news. Some of them, like Merriam-Webster, will have an internal panel of experts going over the year's search data before they choose a word that they feel best reflects the zeitgeist. One entertaining process that I was part of myself was for the American Dialect Society, which we'll announce is in January, which is a little bit too democratic because, and I say too democratic because the year that I was there, it was in the middle of the pandemic, and all the older people stayed at home, so it was chosen by a group of young undergraduate and graduate students. And I'd never heard of any of the nominees. The nominated words were all words that were from TikTok or whatever, and they ended up choosing the suffix ussy, U-S-S-Y, which I still haven't seen in a while. Anyway, so, and then last year, the word that they came up with was a word that is, I think, a much better choice, but it's actually a Canadianism, but it's too rude for me to say on the radio.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Do you want to spell it?
Sure.
No, I can say it. I can say it because I'm the linguist here, and linguists are allowed to say things for demonstration. So the word is enshittification. It means that certain media platforms, social media platforms, have been enshittified by now, stripping you of your reach, and you have to pay for it now to get like your clicks and your exposure. That's enshittification, coined by Cory Doctorow, who's a Canadian tech writer.
Okay, also Stefan Dollinger, I have to say, though, when you say it, it actually sounds quite nice, whereas if I say it with my Ontario accent, it's going to sound quite harsh.
Yeah, the Austrian accent is, it's unbeatable. Schwarzenegger had, he made a career with it, or despite it, I don't know. So, yeah. It's all good.
Isn't it also...
You sound so authoritative.
Isn't it also interesting that there can be a word of the year, so the Merriam-Webster word was polarization. Collins earlier, and it is a hipper word, chose brat from having a brat summer, which is in the music pop culture world. So you can have one life existence, but you also have different words that, symbolize what your country has gone through over the past 12 months.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I think that's a good reason why we need to have a Canadian Word of the Year. I'm afraid we're only up to the letter. We started with the letter Q, editing the Canadian English Dictionary this year, and we will finish the letter Q, but that's as far as we've gotten. And there are not a lot of Q words that are really topical or good candidates for a Word of the Year, so we're not going to choose one this year. We thought about the word quinsy, which is a type of snow shelter, and quad chair, which is a four-legged camping chair, but they're not. We want something that is not only topical and significant, but, Canadian. And I would personally also want one that scores well in Scrabble, which, anything starts with a Q would.
John Chu, do we normally have a Canadian word of the year like the Americans choose with all their dictionaries? Do we usually have one or no?
We have not had one. We have not had a Canadian English dictionary in 20 years, which is why I've started working on one. I promise you, though, next year, this time of year, we'll have a Canadian word of the year. I can suggest a few if you wanted to help me choose a possible one for this year, like an honorary mention one.
Well, yeah. Do you have one rattling around your brain?
I'll give you three quick choices, okay?
Okay.
One of them is a Q word. It's the word quest. It's on my mind because it's got a Q in it, and also because there was a news story this summer about how the Royal Canadian Geographical Society found Sir Ernest Shackleton's Antarctic exploration ship, the Quest, which had sunk off the coast of Labrador for some reason. And I think it also speaks
to a Canadian choice. That is a good Canadian option. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. What's the second one?
Thank you. It speaks to how we're looking for a direction in our lives also. Okay. The second one that I was thinking of was the phrase that is from Stefan's book, the Canadian Dictionary of Canadian Historical Principles. It's the phrase "the border," which has a very specific meaning in Canada. When we say the border, there's only one border we're talking about, and we mean the border between us and our esteemed neighbors to the south.
Yep.
When Americans talk about the border, they similarly talk about the Mexican border, but if they want to talk about the border between them and us, they talk about the Canadian border. Yeah. So the border, that's a Canadianism.
The border is a really good one. Or, the line across the line could be one of that is relating to it, but the border is really a good one, and it's got a profound Canadian perspective. Yeah, I really like that one, John. Mm-hmm.
Okay, the last one is a new one, not in Stefan's book yet. It's the phrase jailbreak, and not in the sense of escape from a penitentiary, but in the new rule that the PWHL has, that where a shorthanded goal in a game of women's hockey will end a minor penalty. Now, I know the PWHL just started, and they're American-owned and doesn't have any Western teams, but I think the rule itself is a great idea for the game. It's got a catchy name, and it feels Canadian to me, this idea that you can help your teammates out of the so-called sin bin or penalty box by doing something heroic on your own. So which one would you choose?
I love the border. I would choose the border because it's so topical right now with tariffs and what's in the news and sort of symbolic and emblematic of everything that's been happening over the past 12 months. I like the border. It also sounds like a TV show.
And a good one, a good one, yeah. No, there wasn't. There is this Danish show which is called The Bridge, but this is the bridge that is the border between Denmark and Sweden. Very good show too. Yeah, absolutely. You're right.
Professor Dollinger, let me wrap it up with this. What ultimately, as a lover of words and someone who studies words, do you like having a word of the year academically because it's something to think about, something to examine? Or do you think that, it sort of simplifies what we do, how we speak, how we learn with so many thousands of words floating around our world every single day?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and a few years ago I would have had a different answer, but now I know, and I'm even certain, that we need one, because it sort of galvanizes the focus of all those world lovers, Scrabble players, the multilinguals, the francophones, the allophones, the anglophones. I think something... Yeah, it would be nice to have it. It sort of is a focal point, and then, once you start talking about the border and whether it's really a word or it's two words or how we're going to deal with this, then you can feed in more detail as people are interested, right? But we have to have it, and it never worked with the American one. I've been to those American Dialect Society meetings too, and in 2008, when Parliament was prorogued, this would have been the perfect choice, but had no chance because it was drowned out in this American Sea. And then they chose in the end, what did they choose in 2008? Let me check for a minute. The bailout, for the bank bailout. Well, that's a global one. 2009 was tweet. So, they don't always get it wrong, but it's never Canadian. It's always, American by, if they're lucky, global. But it's never Canadian. So I think we need one, and I'm glad that you thought of it, Sarah, because if we're going to have one, when we're going to have one next year, then we are going to blame you.
Hey,
for making this happen.
This time next year, both of you will come back, and maybe for 2 weeks, we could do like a 10-word lead-up and highlight some of the runners-up, and then we will ultimately, right before Christmas, present the Canadian word of the year. And we'll do this all again next year, but with maple syrup and all Canada.
Right, and
awesome.
I think we also have to make sure, John, that we get sort of some nationwide input. So we have to have some sort of survey. I mean, I'm thinking out loud here. What do you think?
I think it's got to be totally Canadian. You're right.
Yeah. Well, thank you for both of you joining today. That's Stefan Dollinger from the University of British Columbia at Vancouver. John Chu, editor of the Canadian English Dictionary. Fantastic Canadian chat. Thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much, Sarah. My pleasure.